I spent $6,000 to change my voice, and my family called me crazy. They said I was throwing money away on vanity. But after 23 years of being mistaken for a woman every single time I answered the phone, I knew something had to change. What I discovered about my condition, and what happened after the surgery, changed everything I thought I knew about myself. My name is Marcus, and I'm 28 years old. This is the story of how I finally found my real voice, and why it cost me so much more than money. Growing up in suburban Cleveland, I was always the kid with the weird voice, not just high-pitched, but genuinely confusing to people. My mom, Diane, used to laugh it off when strangers would call our house and ask to speak to Mrs. Thompson when I answered. "Oh, that's just Marcus," she'd say, taking the phone from me with an apologetic smile. His voice hasn't changed yet. But here's the thing, I was already 16 when she was still saying that. 17, 18. My friends had all gone through puberty years earlier, their voices dropping to normal masculine ranges, while mine remained stubbornly high and thin. It wasn't just embarrassing anymore. It was isolating. My dad, Robert, tried to be supportive in his own way. He'd ruffle my hair and say, "Don't worry, son. Some boys are just late bloomers. Your grandfather didn't get his deep voice until he was 20. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But as the years passed and college came and went, I started to realize that this wasn't about being a late bloomer. This was something else entirely. The worst part wasn't even the voice itself. It was the constant explanation. Every phone call became an ordeal. Ordering pizza meant bracing myself for confusion. Calling to make appointments meant having to clarify. "No, this is Marcus, not Michelle." The person on the other end would always sound skeptical, like I was playing some kind of prank. During my junior year at Ohio State, I was calling to inquire about a summer internship at a marketing firm downtown. The receptionist answered with her usual professional greeting. "Hi, I'm calling about the summer internship program," I said. "Of course, miss. Can I get your name, please?" "It's Marcus Thompson." There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause. "I'm sorry. Marcus, did you say Marcus?" "Yes, Marcus. Marcus." Another pause. "Oh, I see. Let me transfer you to our HR department." I could hear the confusion in her voice, the way she was probably looking at her computer screen, trying to reconcile what she was hearing with what she expected. It was that same tone I'd heard thousands of times before. Polite confusion mixed with barely concealed bewilderment. I didn't get the internship. Was it because of my voice? I'll never know for sure, but the doubt was always there, eating away at my confidence. My girlfriend at the time, Jasmine, tried to be understanding. We'd been dating for about 8 months when the voice thing started affecting our relationship in ways I hadn't anticipated. "Marcus, you're being too sensitive about this," she said one evening as we sat in her dorm room. "Nobody really cares about your voice. You're making this into a bigger deal than it is. Nobody cares." I stared at her. "Jasmine, I can't order food without confusing people. I can't make professional phone calls without having to explain myself. How is that not a big deal?" She sighed and closed her textbook. "Look, I love you exactly the way you are. Your voice is part of who you are. Why can't you just accept that?" "Because it's not me," I said quietly. "This isn't who I'm supposed to be." She looked at me like I was being dramatic, like I was manufacturing a problem that didn't exist. And maybe that's what hurt the most. The people closest to me couldn't see what this was doing to me inside. We broke up 3 months later, not directly because of the voice thing, but it was there, underlying everything. The way she'd sometimes answer my calls when we were together, the way she'd handle phone orders when we were out, the way she'd subtly take over in situations where my voice might cause confusion. She meant well, but it made me feel like even she didn't think I could handle being myself in public. After college, I moved back home to figure out my next steps. The job search was brutal. Phone interviews were nightmares. I'd get past the initial application phase, have a great phone conversation with HR, and then show up for the in-person interview to see confusion flash across their faces when I introduced myself. "You're Marcus?" they'd ask, clearly trying to reconcile the voice they'd heard on the phone with the person standing in front of them. I finally landed a job at a small accounting firm where my boss, Gregory, had only communicated with me through email before our meeting. He was professional enough not to comment on the voice discrepancy, but I could see the questions in his eyes. The work was fine, but every client phone call was an adventure. I'd answer with Thompson Accounting, "This is Marcus," and inevitably get responses like, "Is Marcus available?" Or can I speak to someone else, please? My coworker, Nina, who sat in the cubicle next to mine, started fielding most of my calls without being asked. She was trying to be helpful, but it just reinforced how abnormal the situation was. Marcus, line 2 is for you, she'd say, then whisper, I told them you were a guy, so they're expecting you. It was humiliating. Here I was, 25 years old, and my coworker had to prepare clients for the sound of my voice like she was giving them a medical warning. My mom still insisted everything was normal. During one of our weekly dinners, she brought it up again. Honey, you know your voice is perfectly fine, right? You're just being self-conscious. Remember when you were little and thought you were too short? Now look at you, you're almost 6 feet tall. Mom, this is different. This isn't about self-consciousness. This is about having a voice that doesn't match who I am. My dad chimed in from across the table. Son, we've all got things we'd like to change about ourselves. I've been trying to lose this gut for 20 years. But you learn to live with what God gave you. Dad, respectfully, you don't get mistaken for a woman every time someone hears you speak. He shrugged. Maybe not, but I get mistaken for my father-in-law sometimes. Voices are just voices, Marcus. It's what you say that matters, not how you sound saying it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to make them understand that this wasn't vanity or insecurity. This was about feeling like a stranger in my own body, like my voice belonged to someone else entirely. But they'd made up their minds. To them, I was being dramatic about a non-issue. Things started to change when I turned 26. I'd been dealing with some persistent throat discomfort and decided to see an ENT specialist, Dr. Amanda Reeves, just to make sure nothing serious was going on. Dr. Reeves was in her 40s, professional but warm, and she had this way of really listening when you talked. Not just hearing, but actually paying attention to what you were saying. So, Marcus, you mentioned some throat discomfort. How long has this been going on? About 6 months, I said. It's not painful exactly, just uncomfortable. Like there's always something there. She nodded and made some notes. I'm going to do a quick examination, and then we'll take a look at your vocal cords with the scope. Is that okay with you? As she examined my throat, I could see her expression change slightly. Not concerned exactly, but focused in a way that made me pay attention. Marcus, can you tell me about your voice? Has it always sounded like this? Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it never really changed during puberty like other guys' voices did. She paused in her examination. Has anyone ever mentioned anything to you about that? Any doctors or specialists? No, I just figured I was a late bloomer or something. My family always said it was normal. Dr. Reeves was quiet for a moment, then sat back in her chair. Marcus, I want to take a closer look at your vocal cords and do some additional tests. Based on what I'm seeing and hearing, I think you might have a condition called puberphonia. What? Puberphonia. It's also sometimes called mutational falsetto. Basically, it's when the larynx doesn't descend properly during male puberty, so the voice remains high-pitched even after the person has physically matured. I stared at her. You mean, this isn't normal? No, Marcus, this isn't normal. And more importantly, it's treatable. The world seemed to tilt for a moment. 26 years of being told this was just how I was, that I was being too sensitive, that there was nothing wrong, and suddenly I'm being told there's an actual medical name for what I was experiencing. Treatable how? Well, there are a few options. Speech therapy can sometimes help, but in cases like yours where the condition has persisted this long, surgical intervention is often more effective. Surgery. The word hung in the air between us like a possibility I'd never allowed myself to consider. What kind of surgery? It's called a thyroplasty. Essentially, we make small adjustments to the thyroid cartilage around your vocal cords to lower the pitch of your voice. It's a relatively straightforward procedure, but it does require someone who specializes in this type of surgery. My mind was racing, and it actually works. In most cases, yes. Patients typically see a significant reduction in vocal pitch, often from the range you're in now, which is probably around 130 to 140 Hz, down to something more typically masculine, around 80 to 100 Hz. I felt like crying, not from sadness, but from relief. There was a name for what I had. There was a treatment. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't being overly sensitive. Dr. Reeves, I have to ask, could this be related to other things? I've always felt like maybe my testosterone levels were low or something. She nodded thoughtfully. It's possible. Sometimes puberphonia can be associated with what we call low androgenic energy, essentially lower testosterone levels during the critical development period. We can run some tests to check your current hormone levels if you'd like. When I got home that evening, I was buzzing with a mixture of excitement and vindication. I called my parents immediately. Mom, I just got back from the ent specialist. Oh good, honey. What did she say about your throat? She says I have something called puberphonia. It's a real medical condition. Mom, my voice never changed properly during puberty. There was silence on the other end. Marcus, that sounds made up. Are you sure this doctor knows what she's talking about? Mom, she's a specialist. She explained everything. There's even surgery that can fix it. Surgery? My dad's voice came through. He'd picked up the extension. Son, you're not seriously considering surgery for your voice, are you? Dad, this is a real condition. I've spent my entire adult life being mistaken for a woman on the phone. Don't you think that's worth addressing? Marcus, my mom said, her tone shifting to that particular brand of parental concern. You're talking about surgery. Real surgery. For what? So you can sound a little different, so I can sound like myself, I said firmly, so I can sound like the man I actually am. Honey, you are the man you are. Your voice doesn't change that. We love you exactly as you are. I took a deep breath. I know you love me, but this isn't about love. This is about me feeling comfortable in my own body. My dad sighed heavily. Marcus, this sounds like one of those trendy procedures that people get when they have too much money and not enough sense. You're talking about paying some surgeon to mess with your throat so you can sound different. That's vanity, son. It's not vanity, Dad. It's medical treatment for a diagnosed condition. A condition that hasn't prevented you from living a normal life, my mom added. You have a job, you've had relationships, you're healthy and successful. Why risk all of that for something so superficial? I felt that familiar isolation creeping back in. Even with a diagnosis, even with medical validation, they still couldn't see what this meant to me. Look, I'm not making any decisions right now. I'm just telling you what the doctor said. Can't you at least acknowledge that this is real? Of course it's real if a doctor said it, my mom replied. But that doesn't mean surgery is the answer. Have you looked into therapy? Maybe there are exercises you can do. I had looked into it, actually. Dr. Reeves had explained that speech therapy was an option, but after so many years, the muscular patterns were deeply ingrained. The success rate for non-surgical treatment in cases like mine was relatively low. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into research. I read everything I could find about puberphonia, about vocal surgery, about the psychological impact of voice disorders. What I found was revelatory. There were studies showing that men with puberphonia often experience significant anxiety, depression, and social withdrawal. There were testimonials from men who'd had the surgery describing the profound impact it had on their confidence and quality of life. There were medical papers discussing the relationship between voice and gender identity and how voice disorders could affect a person's sense of self. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being overly sensitive. What I was experiencing was documented, studied, and understood by the medical community. But finding a surgeon was another challenge entirely. The procedure wasn't commonly performed in the United States, and the few specialists who did offer it had waiting lists that stretched for months, or even years. That's when I started looking internationally. I found Dr. Kemal Öztürk in Istanbul, Turkey. He specialized in voice feminization and masculinization surgeries, and his before and after recordings were incredible. Men who sounded just like me pre-surgery, speaking in completely normal, masculine voices afterward. The cost was $6,000, including the hospital stay and follow-up care. In the US, the same procedure, if I could find someone to do it, would cost upwards of $15,000 and might not even be covered by insurance. I scheduled a consultation via video call. Dr. Öztürk was probably in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He spoke excellent English with a slight accent. Marcus, I've reviewed the recordings you sent, and I can see why you're interested in this procedure. Your case is quite typical for puberphonia. Your fundamental frequency is around 135 Hz, which is well within the female range. Is it fixable? Absolutely. With a thyroplasty type 3 procedure, I would expect to bring your voice down to around 85 to 90 Hz, which is solidly within the male range. The surgery involves making small adjustments to your thyroid cartilage to relax the vocal cords and lower the pitch. He showed me diagrams, explained the risks, walked me through the recovery process. It would take about an hour and a half under general anesthesia. I'd need to stay in Istanbul for a week for follow-up appointments. Full recovery would take about 6 weeks, during which I'd need to be very careful with my voice. Dr. Öztürk, what's your success rate with this procedure? For puberphonia cases like yours, I'd say about 95% of patients are very satisfied with their results. The risk of complications is very low, and the change in voice quality is typically quite dramatic. I scheduled the surgery for 3 months out, giving myself time to save money and mentally prepare. I didn't tell my family right away. When I finally did tell them, about a month before the surgery, the reaction was exactly what I expected. "Marcus, you're not seriously going to Turkey to have surgery on your voice," my mom said. We were having dinner at their house, and the conversation had been pleasant until I brought up my travel plans. "Mom, I've done all the research. Dr. Osterk is one of the most experienced surgeons in the world for this type of procedure in Turkey," my dad said flatly. "You're going to Turkey to let some foreign doctor operate on your throat?" "Dad, he's not some foreign doctor. He's a specialist with hundreds of successful procedures under his belt. And Istanbul has excellent medical facilities." My mom set down her fork. "Marcus, this is insane. You're risking your life for vanity. What if something goes wrong? What if he damages your vocal cords permanently? What if you can't speak at all anymore? The risk of serious complications is less than 1%, I said. "And Mom, this isn't vanity. This is about finally feeling like myself." "You are yourself," she said, her voice rising. "Your voice doesn't define who you are. We raised you to be confident and strong regardless of how you sound, and you did a great job," I said. "But this is my decision to make." My dad leaned back in his chair. "Son, I'm going to be honest with you. This sounds like a quarter-life crisis to me. You're nearly 30, you're single, you're living alone, maybe you're just looking for something to blame for why your life isn't going the way you want it to." That stung because there was a grain of truth to it. My life wasn't going exactly the way I'd planned. But the voice thing wasn't a scapegoat, it was a real obstacle that had affected my confidence, my relationships, and my professional life for as long as I could remember. "Dad, respectfully, you have no idea what it's like to live with this. You've never had to explain yourself every time you answer the phone. You've never had people hang up on you because they think you're lying about your identity. You've never had to watch someone else handle your phone calls because it's easier than dealing with the confusion. And you think changing your voice is going to solve all your problems?" My mom asked. "I think changing my voice is going to solve the problems caused by my voice," I replied. "The other stuff I'll figure out on my own." They weren't happy, but they could see I'd made up my mind. My mom cried a little, which made me feel terrible, but I knew I had to do this for myself. The 3 months passed quickly. I arranged time off work, telling Gregory that I was having a minor medical procedure done overseas. He didn't ask for details, which I appreciated. Nina, my cubicle neighbor, was more curious. "Turkey? That's random. What kind of procedure?" "Voice surgery," I said. "I have a condition called puberphonia." Her eyes widened. "Really? Is that why?" She gestured vaguely in the direction of her throat. "Yeah, that's why I sound like this. The surgery should fix it." "Marcus, that's amazing. I had no idea that was even a thing that could be treated." It was the first genuinely positive reaction I'd gotten from anyone close to me, and it meant more than I could express. The flight to Istanbul was long and gave me plenty of time to think. Was I making the right decision? Was this really necessary, or was I just unable to accept myself as I was? But then I thought about all the phone calls, all the confusion, all the times I'd felt like I was hiding behind someone else's voice. I thought about how many opportunities I might have missed because my voice made people uncertain about me before they even met me. By the time I landed in Istanbul, I was sure. Dr. Osterk's clinic was modern and professional, with staff who spoke excellent English. The pre-surgical consultation confirmed everything we discussed over video call. My vocal cords were healthy, but the positioning was all wrong for a male voice. "Marcus, after tomorrow, you'll have a few days where you won't be able to speak much at all," Dr. Osterk explained. "Then, gradually, you'll start to hear the change. The full results won't be apparent for about 6 weeks, but you should notice a difference almost immediately once the initial swelling goes down." The surgery itself was a blur. I went under anesthesia around AM and woke up around noon with a throat that felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. They'd warned me about the pain, but knowing it was coming didn't make it easier. I couldn't speak for the first 3 days. Communication was limited to writing notes and gestures. The hotel staff were incredibly patient and kind, bringing me soft foods and ice chips to help with the discomfort. On the 4th day, Dr. Osterk cleared me to try speaking in whispers. The first word I said was hello, and even at a whisper, I could hear the difference. It was subtle, but definitely lower than before. "Good," Dr. Osterk said, checking my throat. "The swelling is going down nicely." You can try normal speaking volume tomorrow, but be very gentle. No shouting, no straining, no whispering. Paradoxically, whispering is actually harder on your vocal cords than normal speech. That night, I called my parents to let them know the surgery had gone well. My mom answered on the second ring. "Hello," she said. "Hi, Mom. It's Marcus." There was a pause. "Marcus, you sound different." "The surgery went well. Dr. Osterk says everything looks good." "Oh, honey, how do you feel? Are you in pain?" "It's manageable. The worst part is over." My dad got on the line. "Son, you really do sound different. Deeper." "That's the point, Dad. Well, as long as you're safe. We were worried about you." It was a small step, but for the first time in this whole process, they seemed to acknowledge that yes, there was a difference, and yes, it was real. Over the next week, as the swelling continued to decrease, the change became more and more apparent. By the time I flew back to Cleveland, my voice had dropped to what Dr. Osterk estimated was around 86 Hz, well, within the normal range for adult males. The first real test came at the airport when I had to call for a ride home. "Thank you for calling airport taxi service. This is Jennifer." "Hi, I need a pickup from Hopkins International Airport." "Absolutely, sir." "What's your name?" "Sir." She'd called me sir without any hesitation or confusion. It was such a small thing, but it felt monumental. "Marcus Thompson." "Perfect, Mr. Thompson. We'll have someone there in about 15 minutes. The ride home gave me time to think about what came next. How would people react? Would my family finally understand why this had been so important to me? Would my coworkers notice? I needn't have wondered. The reactions were immediate and unmistakable. When I walked into the office the following Monday, Nina looked up from her desk and did a literal double take. "Marcus." "Oh my God, Marcus, is that you?" "Hey, Nina. You sound completely different." "Like, completely? That's incredible." Gregory came out of his office to see what the commotion was about. When I said good morning, his jaw actually dropped. "Marcus, wow, that's a dramatic change. How do you feel?" "Like myself," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in my adult life, my voice matched who I felt like on the inside. The phone calls were revelatory. No more confusion, no more having to spell out my name or explain my identity. I was just another guy making phone calls, and it was glorious. But the real transformation was psychological. I found myself speaking up more in meetings, volunteering for client calls, taking initiative in ways I never had before. It wasn't just that people weren't confused by my voice anymore, it was that I wasn't constantly bracing myself for their confusion. My family took longer to come around. During our next dinner, they acknowledged the change, but seemed almost reluctant to admit how significant it was. "You do sound very different," my mom said carefully. "How do you feel about it?" "I feel like I can finally breathe," I said. "Like I've been holding my breath for 28 years, and I can finally exhale." My dad was quiet for most of the meal, but as I was getting ready to leave, he pulled me aside. "Marcus, I owe you an apology." "Dad, you don't know. Let me say this. I didn't understand. I thought you were being dramatic, making a big deal out of nothing. But hearing you now, seeing how different you seem, I can tell this was important. I'm sorry I didn't support you." It wasn't a complete turnaround, but it was acknowledgement. It was him admitting that maybe, just maybe, I'd known what I needed better than anyone else. 3 months after the surgery, I met someone. Her name was Quincy, and she was a graphic designer who'd just moved to Cleveland from Portland. We matched on a dating app, and when I called to ask her out, there was no confusion, no awkward explanations. Just a normal conversation between two people getting to know each other. "You have a nice voice," she said during our first phone call. Such a simple compliment, but it meant everything to me. She didn't know about the surgery, didn't know about the years of struggling with my voice. To her, I was just Marcus, a guy with a normal voice asking her to dinner. We've been together for 6 months now, and I finally told her the whole story last month. Her reaction was perfect. "That must have been so hard," she said. "I can't imagine living with that kind of uncertainty about something so basic as how you sound to other people." She got it. She understood immediately why this had been necessary, why it wasn't vanity or insecurity, but something deeper and more fundamental. Looking back now, 9 months after the surgery, I can say without hesitation that it was the best decision I've ever made. Not because it changed who I am, but because it allowed me to finally be who I am without explanation or apology. I never thought I'd be someone who would get cosmetic surgery. I'd always been skeptical of people who modified their appearance for psychological reasons. But this wasn't about appearance, it was about alignment. It was about making my external presentation match my internal reality. The cost was significant. $6,000 is a lot of money for someone in their 20s. But when I think about what I gained: confidence, authenticity, the simple ability to answer the phone without anxiety, it was worth every penny. My voice is now a consistent 86 Hz, exactly where Dr. Osterg predicted it would settle. It's not deep like a radio announcer or anything dramatic, it's just normal, unremarkable. And that's exactly what I wanted. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I miss my old voice, if I think I was running away from part of myself. The answer is simple: you can't miss something that was never really yours to begin with. For 28 years, I was borrowing a voice that belonged to someone else. Now, finally, I'm speaking with my own voice, and I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The recovery was worth it. The cost was worth it. The family drama was worth it. Everything was worth it to finally sound like the person I've always been inside. I don't regret it for a single second. Not one.